I'll give you a lecture on how to conceptualize a research topic, especially that you are still about to conduct a study. So before you conduct a study, you have to hear first important lectures on research conceptualization. Actually, research conceptualization is very important since we wanted that our research should be something that is new, that is novel, or something that is unique, different, and somewhat somehow contribute to the body of knowledge and can be utilized for policy making or any benefits that can it contribute to the society. So before we go to the actual process of research conceptualization, I'll give you important aspects that you need to consider uh, before you do research conceptualization. And actually, there are five important criteria for a very good research topic. So I'll present you one by one. And actually, I want that these particular parameters must be considered in your research. So the first criteria is that your study must be feasible. You should always remember that a research should be attainable in a particular work plan or duration. Remember that you as students, you also have other classes, other subjects that are also equally very important. So that is why you have to budget your time, you have to have certain schedules, and remember that in research, it will really get your important time since this is not just theoretical and conceptual. You need to have practical application on this because at the end of the semester, it is expected that you will have a research proposal and you need to defend that one in front of the panelists. So feasibility is very much important in research and it is synonymous to attainability. And if your research is not feasible, then of course you cannot finish or you cannot graduate or you cannot finish your manuscript. So in terms of feasibility, there are actually subcomponents. First is the adequacy of the number of subjects. You should always remember that in research, we need to have participants of the study to get information, and based from their information, we can actually provide findings. However, you need to bear in mind also that in a study, there are required number of participants, especially in a quantitative research in which it needs a lot of participants because the higher number of participants in a quantitative research, the better. Um, on the other hand, in a qualitative research, there are less participants, but somewhat your participants must follow certain characteristics or you will have certain inclusion and exclusion criteria and sometimes the participants are very difficult to find. So in qualitative research, you will conduct IDI or in-depth interview and at the same time you will also have focus group discussion. So normally you can have 10 participants for IDI and 7 participants for focus group discussion. So a total of 17 participants, but although that's only few, but you should always remember there are some participants that are very difficult to find, especially that you have specialized characteristics of participants. So for example, your participants are those people living with HIV. So you have to remember that these people are very difficult to find. You cannot just ask somebody, do you have HIV? That's very unethical. So you need to have connections and permissions coming from different agencies in order to get them. Sometimes also your participants have uh, actually you have difficulty to meet them. For example, your participants are presidents of different organizations or institutions. So you need to really have an appointment with them, and somewhat there could be a bigger chance that they will not cooperate because they are very much busy in their work, and at the same time, you will have slim chance to have an appointment with them, especially during this pandemic situation that there is difficulty to have face-to-face communication with different people. So remember that when you are conceptualizing a research topic, you have to consider first who are the participants of the study, how many, and at the same time, you will determine in advance whether you can reach them. The second aspect is affordability in time and money. You should always remember that, as what I have mentioned a while ago, that time is very much important because you have a target that at this particular point of time, you can already finish your manuscript or your proposal. And at this particular period of time, you can already defend your paper in front of the panelists and to be approved by the panelists. Because if if you don't consider time, most likely that most of the groups or having thesis will not finish their work or the research work in a certain timeline. And of course, if you cannot finish that one, then you cannot graduate in your course because this is one of the major requirements. As part of graduation, you should have a hardbound copy of your research. Next is affordability when it comes to money. Remember that when you conduct research, there should there should be always a budget. Budget when it comes to logistics, bond paper, energy fee, internet fee, and at the same time, you will also allot a budget during defense. And for example, statisticians, grammarian, and important professionals that can actually be uh, your support mechanism in the finalization of your research. So that is why, especially also when you are conducting data gathering, you move from one place to another. So there should be budget for transportation. So that is why, as what I have mentioned a while ago, you need to have a timeline or duration and at the same time a budget template or a budget proposal in order that you know that this research is achievable when it comes to timeline and at the same time when it comes to budget. The next is availability of technical experts. In education or in business, we have enough supply of technical experts in our institution. However, there are some cases that technical experts when it comes to statistician, okay, there are some cases that you are doing an advanced statistics, and experts like statisticians are actually one of the elements that you need to consider if they are available. If you are using advanced statistics, if those statisticians in your schools are available to analyze that particular data using the selected statistical tool. Also, there are some experts when it comes to the the field. Okay, so if you are studying about, for example, the teaching strategies in the new normal, and you have to consider those experts who have experience in distance learning. So most likely, there are less that we can find in our region. So most of the experienced individuals are actually coming from other universities, not in the region, because they are already implementing that one even before we had the pandemic. And since they have this particular technical expertise, then they can help in your paper. But if these technical experts are not available in the school or in the region, then of course you will have a problem in the finalization of your paper, because sometimes they usually help when it comes to standardization in your methodology, and at the same time the tool or the instrument that you are using to obtain data coming from the participants. So they can do validation of your questionnaire, and at the same time, they can also give you expert advice when it comes to the nitty gritty of your paper. The next aspect is the research must be manageable in scope. There are some cases that we are so ambitious that we need to expand our scope into other provinces in the region. So the tendency is that it will also follow increase in your time, okay? Increase in the number of participants of the study because you also expand your scope. And at the same time, you will also need to have a lot of budget. So if I were you, you should have certain limitation when it comes to the scope of the study. So the next criteria is that your study must be interesting. You have to bear in mind that there are some studies that are just a replica of the previous studies. Some of the researchers are actually just copying the variables, and at the same time, they just change the scope. Like, for example, the study is actually from other country, and they will just say that there's no study conducted in the Philippines. So that would mean that you are just actually copying variables in which it will not anymore give important additional body of knowledge, and somehow that particular study already have a lot of findings, a lot of information. So the tendency is the study is not anymore interesting. We know already that the findings are already common and general in many countries. Like, for example, a study about teaching styles and academic performance. There are already a lot of studies about teaching styles and academic performance from 1930s, 1950s, 1990s, 2000s, and even up until now. The results are still the same, that there is a significant relationship between teaching styles and academic performance. The better the teaching style, the more likely that the student's performance will also go high. So that is why that particular study is not anymore giving additional information, because it's already validated in many generations that the results are most likely the same. So to make your study interesting, you have to consider issues and problems that we are experiencing right now in the society. And you have to align your discipline. If you are in the teaching profession, if you are in the business profession, you should align studies in which these particular areas are experienced in your discipline at this period of time. So for example, the problem or issue is about the learning delivery in times of COVID-19 pandemic. So that will be a very interesting study, since it entails certain problems and issues encountered by the teachers and even the learners in times of COVID-19 pandemic that we are actually experiencing right now. If you are in the business profession, you might consider also the impact or even the certain challenges and experiences of small and medium enterprises when it comes to productivity in COVID-19 crisis or pandemic. So in that particular case, to make your study interesting, you determine issues, even top 10 issues, problems in the society or in your discipline, okay, or in the country in the present time. And of course, always remember that interesting topics are actually aligned to problems and issues in the society. The next parameter is your study must be novel. Your study must be something new, something unique, and it can conform or refute previous findings. Aside from that, it can extend, okay, previous knowledge, okay, and at the same time, it should provide new findings. Because if your study will not give additional information to the body of knowledge, then your study is somewhat a replica and it will not be a novel study. So to make your study novel, you have to consider what are the things that are previously done in the body of knowledge or literature. So you need to have a lot of readings, a lot of informations about several studies related to your concept or issues or problem that you wanted to study or to solve. And after doing inventory of studies, you can already find areas or weak areas or what we call as the research gap. And that particular weak areas are something that you need to write down and list down because these particular areas are actually the gap in knowledge in which you wanted to address. And once you have observed that um, certain areas have not been studied, then when you enter and you have to address that particular gap, then your study is now novel. The next aspect is that your study must be ethical. Remember that you are dealing with human subjects. They are not just merely subjects, but they are actually part of your study. Do not consider them just like a guinea pig or just like a certain individuals whom you wanted to take samples only, but you have to consider the benefits and the welfare of your participants. Remember that in the concept of ethics, the benefit should outweigh the risk. Although in your course you are in education or business, you are just doing or conducting survey among the participants, but it doesn't really mean that it doesn't cause physical you will say that it will not cause any physical harm. But always remember, when you are conducting interview or you will let them answer the questionnaire, it may also invade them psychologically and emotionally. So that is why the participants of the study must not be coerced. They should have voluntarily participate in your study. You need to get informed consent. You need to obtain informed consent from them. And that particular informed consent, they are ensured that there will be confidentiality, there will be anonymity, and of course, all the responses that the participants are giving to you or providing you are actually for research purposes only. You need not to name them. And at the same time, if they feel uneasy or irritable during the time of data gathering, they always have the right to withdraw. Always remember that one. So, for example, you wanted to interview a tricycle driver about their financial situation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And kunyari, that is for business majors. And if, for example, you are in the um, teaching education or teacher education, you can conduct an interview, for example, about parental involvement in the COVID-19 mode of delivery. So when you are conducting that particular what we call as interview, and the father is a tricycle driver, and um, you will be conducting, for example, a 30-minute interview for that particular person. The question there is how much is lost, okay, economically to that person within 30 minutes of interview. So that's very unethical because there is always risk. It's not only that you are not causing physical harm, but there is risk economically to that particular family because at 30 minutes, okay, they may lose a certain income. So to make it ethical, you can ask the driver or the parent, how much can you earn within 30 minutes driving? If they said that I can earn about 20 pesos net average within 30 minutes driving, can I pay you can I pay you 20 pesos or even higher, and let's have a 30-minute interview? So that is more ethical. So always remember that they should have benefits in your study rather than you only think about the finalization of your data gathering. So ethics is very much important, and our institution have research ethics board. After your proposal defense, the research ethics board will scrutinize your paper and will determine whether the participants of the study are actually protected by the researchers. The last parameter is your study must be relevant. You have to also bear in mind that the study will not only address the body of knowledge, it will not only extend previous knowledge, but your study should be utilized by the beneficiaries, by the community, by the society in order to improve policies. It can be used for the development of guidelines, or it can be used for intervention or enhancement program. And that particular study can actually um, improve the services and at the same time improve the quality of life of the community. So the relevance of the study must be incorporated in your research concept because it will also be one of the criteria um, to say that your concept is something that can solve or provide solutions to a certain problem. Remember that we are conducting research because we wanted to solve issues or problems. So that is why these important criteria can have mnemonics. The mnemonic is finer. So F is feasible, I is interesting, 3 is novel, 4 is ethical, and 5 is relevant. These parameters should be incorporated in your research concept. So let's proceed to the next topic, which is the quantitative research designs. Although we will also be discussing qualitative research design, but I'll give you first information about quantitative research design because that's a separate topic. So there are four traditional quantitative research design. The first is the descriptive research design. The descriptive research design describe characteristics of the variables, groups, people, individual, or even phenomenon. So this descriptive design is actually providing no um, implications to certain inferential question. We don't find certain link with with different variables on this particular design. It's just merely describing characteristics. So in the research question, anything that starts with what is actually answering a descriptive, um, is also linking to a descriptive design. So for example, the question is, what is the demographic profile of the respondents, okay, in terms of sex, educational attainment, socioeconomic status. So that is a descriptive question, and it entails a descriptive design. So what is the level of satisfaction of students at school? So that is a descriptive question, and of course it aligns to the descriptive design. So the next design is correlational design. The correlational design is a design that determines the relationship between two or more variables. So in a correlational design, if you wanted to find the association between the variables, then you need to use the correlational design. Usually the research question on this is that, is there a significant relationship between job satisfaction and organizational commitment of employees? So you wanted there to link job satisfaction and organizational commitment, and to investigate whether there is an association between the two variables. So the correlational design measures the magnitude and the trend of relationship, but it does not talk about causation. It will not imply cause-effect relationship. But the correlational design will just give you information about the magnitude and the trend of the relationship. When one variable goes up, what will happen to the other? Will it go up or will it go down? But it will not say that one variable affects the other. So in that case, in that cause-effect relationship, there is another design for that. The next design is comparative research design. If you want to find the significant difference between the outcomes of two or more groups, then you will use the comparative research design. So for example, is there a significant difference in the level of satisfaction of students when grouped according to sex, or year level? So yan, if I will compare male and female when it comes to level of satisfaction, then I will use the comparative research design. So meaning you compare between the groups as to a certain outcomes, then if that is the intention or the goal of your study, then you will use the comparative design. Now is the causal and predictive design. This is what I'm telling you, that in correlational, it does not imply cause-effect relationship. But in the causal or predictive design, it is now the design that address the effect of X on Y. So whether one variable affects the other, then this is now the concern of the causal or predictive research design. So it concerns in forecasting or predicting outcomes. So for example, does job satisfaction significantly predict the organizational commitment of employees? So that particular question is a predictive question, and it will show or investigate whether the job satisfaction will influence or will predict the organizational commitment of employees. So this particular design can actually be merged together to form the design of your study. So if your design contains question on what, okay, what is the demographic profile, what is the level of satisfaction, what is the level of organizational commitment, then that is a descriptive design. But if you also add additional question like, is there a significant relationship between profile and um, commitment of employees, then you need to include also correlational design. So your study can be descriptive correlational research design. You can combine both design, and for example, in your study you have a question on describing characteristics, and at the same time, you also have finding the significant difference between the outcomes of the variable, then your study is descriptive comparative. If you want to predict, then your study is descriptive causal or predictive. But if you have also correlational and comparative, then your study might be descriptive, correlational, and comparative research design. Actually, you can combine designs in your study depending upon your goal and direction or your aim or objectives of the study. So you have to consider this particular design in the research conceptualization so that we will know whether what kind of quantitative research design that you will be using in your method component. However, since if you are conducting a quantitative research design, but there are also other traditional designs in a qualitative research. Now, let's talk about variables. So, there are two common variables in research. We have the independent variable and the dependent variable. So, the independent variable are variable that does not depend on that of another variable. These variables are considered as factors that can influence the outcomes. Outcomes are dependent variable. Always remember that one. So these are antecedents. These particular variables may have an effect on the outcome variable, which is the dependent variable. On the other hand, the dependent variable, as what I have mentioned, is actually the outcome variable. And that particular outcome variable or the dependent variable is the problem and issue under study. So we are actually conducting research because we wanted to solve issue and problem. And that particular issue or problem is actually the dependent variable. When you are starting a study, you need to find issue or problem. So meaning you are now starting your study in finding the dependent variable. So these dependent variable are actually influenced by the independent variable. So whatever changes in the independent variable can also produce change in the dependent variable. So that is why these independent variable are factors that may contribute the change in the dependent variable as well. So in the framework, usually the IV, there is an arrow pointing to DV. And of course, this is the most common framework in which IV have an influence with DV or relationship with DB. So for example, the research title is Work Stress and Turnover Intention of Employees. So in this particular title, this is a quantitative type of research. The independent variable is the work stress and the dependent variable is the turnover intention. So we wanted to know whether work stress have a relationship with the turnover intention of employees. So the problem under study here is the turnover intention, which is also an issue or problem. Because if the employees are leaving the organization or thinking about leaving the organization, this is just an intention, then that can be an organizational problem because an organization cannot exist without the employees. So now let's go to the process of research conceptualization. You need to focus on this because I need to have an output individually. For now, I know that in research or in your thesis one, you have your groupings, but for now, I need individual output so that I can extract information or concept from you, and those top six or top seven concept, we may consider that one as your researchable topic for this course, the research one. So there is a continuation in the research one and research two. What you have conceptualized in research one will be continued in your research two. So in making a research concept, you have to consider the following important components. One, is the problems and issues. So these are paragraphs that you need to place in the research in your concept. So it can be 1 to 2 paragraphs, and you know already that problems and issues are actually your dependent variable. As what I have mentioned a while ago, this is the variable or the problem under study. You have to start your concept with the problems or issues. So what I have mentioned, we are conducting research because we wanted to solve a problem. The next aspect is you need to also have an investigation or readings about the factors that can influence the or that can contribute to the problem or issue or the DV or the dependent variable. You have to look at what are the studies previously done among the factors that may contribute to the dependent variable. It can be 1 to 2 paragraphs, and the next component of the research concept is your research gap. So the research gap is also a way to establish the novelty of your study. You have to conduct a study that are unique and something that have not been touched, or the weaknesses or even the weaknesses of the previous study, because you wanted to contribute to the body of knowledge. And the last component of your research concept is the relevance of your study. As what I have mentioned, the study should be something that can contribute not only to the body of knowledge but can be utilized by the society for policy making, for intervention programs, or even enhancement program. So these are the important components of the research concept that you have to submit to me by next week. So I'll give you an example. Always remember that a research does not start with a title. So I always discourage, especially students who gave me a title, because in reality, the research should follow certain process and procedures and does not start with a title. You are just have, especially when you are conducting quantitative research, you are just having trial and error, especially when you are linking the variables. When you are making a quantitative research or even qualitative research, you have to follow certain process. The title is the last in the research conceptualization. So um, I really discourage those. In fact, it's not a good practice. It's not scientifically done if you are starting with a title. So, for example, the issue and the problem is the turnover intention. As what I have mentioned, the turnover intention is a big problem among organization if the employees are thinking about leaving or resigning in the organization. So, for example, you need to conduct an inventory of study. Like the first paragraph, you have to place the issue and the problem. When you emphasize the issue and problem, you need to have facts and figures, like statistical data to show the extent of the problem. You cannot just say that there is a problem about turnover intention. You have to highlight how extent is the problem. For example, the data from Department of Labor and Employment in 2018 revealed that 3 out of 5 employees leave the organization in the first 5 years. So this is a problem about turnover, and you can see 3 out of 5 is actually a big percentage of employees leaving the organization. It emphasized the extent of the problem. Like for example, 70% of the employees think about leaving the organization in the previous study conducted by Brown 2015 or something like that. Then it will show to us that there is really a problem about turnover among organizations, not only present in the Philippines, but you can actually start in the global situationer. So in the global situationer, do not only cite one country, you can actually provide problem experienced by developing, and underdeveloped countries. So that is why it can be 1 to 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph can be the global situationer, and the second paragraph will be the national issues or problems in our country. So, in the problematic issues, as what I have mentioned, you need to read literatures on that. You need to read articles about turnover. And you can actually conduct, this is just a guide, you can conduct certain inventory. Like for example, author Brown 2016, the problem scenario in that the findings of the research is that 3 out of 5 faculty or employees, for example, this is employees in general, leave the organization in the first 5 years. Then what's the country or region? So in China, and another author is Hector. 70% of employees leave their job and look for better pay abroad. This is a Philippine situationer. So you can have additional inventory in which this particular inventory can be used up or utilized in the paragraphs of your problematic issue component in the research conceptualization. So that is why I mean the inventory of this particular studies will can be the start, okay, especially when writing your research concept. So the next is you need to find factors that contributes to the DB. So what are the factors that can influence turnover intention? You really need to have another inventory, okay, and that particular inventory are also including title, I mean the author, and at the same time the results or the findings or their statements. So in your um, search, what are the factors that influence turnover intention? So there is one author have said that work stress have directly proportional relationship with turnover intention in a group of employees in Greece. Hence, it further revealed that the higher the work stress, the more likely that the employee will think about leaving the organization. So you can see that this is now the statements, okay, the from the authors, okay, or from Hoyle 2009, in his study about the influence of work stress on turnover intention. So another study, nagkanda ka na naman ng inventory that another study from Grow 2017 that another factor is the leadership behavior. And it says that leadership behavior provide contribution to the turnover intention of employees. The better the leadership of the administrator would result to employee retention. So meaning it will not lead to employee turnover or leaving the organization. So that is why this particular paragraph must be consolidated and combined together to form your second component, which is the factors that contributes to the dependent variable. And you can actually add more inventory to really show the different factors or antecedents of turnover intention. Because in this particular case, you can be able to determine the weaknesses of the previous study to form your next component, which is the establishing of the research gap. So the research gap, you might ask yourself, what were previously done? Okay, meaning these are studies conducted before about turnover intention. The next question is what are not yet done? Okay, these are the things that are not yet done in the body of knowledge or the previous research. And the next is what you are going to do. So what you're going to do, meaning what are the things that you have observed, okay, in which this is the glitch or the weaknesses of the previous study, and these are the things that I wanted to do to fill in the gap, to fill in what are not yet done in the previous research. So for example, the first part in establishing the research gap is you have to conduct inventory. So the previous studies put focus on the individual relationship of personal and interpersonal factors that contribute to the turnover intention of employees. So personal factor, that is the work stress. Then interpersonal factors, a while ago, it talks about the leadership behavior. So among the personal factors is the work stress, which provide negative impact on the employee outcome, which is the turnover. And you need to cite the author. On the other hand, the interpersonal factors, okay, factors such as leadership behavior has a positive role on employee retention. So the author also should be cited, Grove 2017. Now, these are the things that have been previously done. The one highlighted in red. The one highlighted in blue is the thing that is not yet done. However, there is no study that has been conducted that determines the combined influence of the two factors as predictors of turnover intention. Hence, so ito na. So this particular blue highlighted component is the weakness of the previous study. So no study have been conducted using the two variables as factors, okay, at the same time used in a study. Like for example, work stress and leadership behavior are joined together as factors to predict employee retention. So wala pang study na ganyan. Hence, this is now what you are going to do. Hence, this study will be conducted to determine which among the factors best predict, okay, turnover intention of employees. So you can see here that the research, okay, is leading towards which among those two factors best predict turnover intention of employees, or even the combined influence of the two factors as predictors of turnover intention. So in the research gap, this is considered as a justification why this research, okay, is a good research topic. So the next component is, of course, the relevance of the study. So the last paragraph should be the relevance of the study. So in the relevance of the study, you need to highlight here the social significance of your study. How can it how can the beneficiaries or agencies benefit from your study, and how can it contribute, okay, to better outcomes, like for example in turnover. So you can say with this scenario, the study needs to be conducted in which the findings can be utilized for the improvement of the human resource development of any organization, to improve employee retention, and at the same time increase the satisfaction of employees, and of course contribute to a better quality of employment among employees in the organization. So you can actually say something about how this study can be utilized, okay, for the benefit of the organization or the company. And of course, after providing all the components, then that's the time that you now generate the title, because your components in the research conceptualization are actually your justification why you have this particular title. So the title is the last component. So in your conceptualization, this is now the outcome, okay? And the title is Work Stress and Leadership Behavior in Relation to the Turnover Intention of Employees. So you can see now that the title should be the last after research conceptualization, because this title is already justified from your inventory of researches, and at the same time from the things that are not yet done, or the research gap, or that's not yet done in the literature. So I want you all to make a research concept. This is individual. I want this submitted on Friday, okay? And I want it individual. I will just post these lecture notes in our Google Classroom, and you have to submit in advance on Friday, so that on Monday next week I can be able to evaluate your outputs and determine better better outcomes that will be suitable or considered as a thesis material. So this will be individual, and of course I will grade you also here individually, and I want you to already start after viewing this lecture video, because always remember, research cannot be done overnight. It will entail a lot of reading. So you have to start now. You have to look at problems and issues so that you can already start your research conceptualization. Again, I will post this lecture notes in our Google Classroom, and the deadline of submission of the final research concept will be on Friday. So thank you very much.